Welcome to Counterpoint. I'm Tanya Allen. COVID has certainly forced us to rethink many things in our life, from where we work to how we work to where we live. Many Canadians have taken advantage of the extra time during the lockdowns to make changes to their lives. How many of us have taken time to reevaluate where we live? Perhaps you are one of the thousands of Canadians who have fled larger urban centres for a few acres in the country. Many of us have thought about how we live. Do we have proper work-life balance? Are we spending enough time with our loved ones? Do children really need all those extracurriculars and programs, or do they need more family time? How many of us have started a new diet, changed our eating habits, tried cooking at home when previously some of us might have exclusively eaten out? And how many of us, for some strange reason, felt that sourdough was the place to start for home baking? Well, COVID and vaccines aside, many Canadians have sought a great reset in how they eat, live, and work. Today, I want to focus on food, health, and wellness. And joining me later in the program to tie it all together is Emily Kennedy, a health and wellness coach and registered holistic nutritionist. But sharing their insights on the importance of what we eat and how it's grown is Rory O'Neill, farmer and principal with Grange Farms, and Ted Zettel from Zettel Family Farms, a multi-generational organic family farm. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
So let's dive right in. Maybe we'll start with you, Ted. Can you please tell us about your family farm?
Sure. So we've been here a long time. My great-grandfather was farming on this land. Just recently, though, in the last 5 years, we have started a very diverse, certified organic, grass-based operation that delivers beef, pork, chicken, and turkey to local customers. So we do home delivery, we have local processing. So we're kind of right from the soil right up to the end consumer, all in one operation.
Wow. And I mean, that's a huge undertaking and a massive enterprise. Rory, you have something similar with Grange Farms.
Yeah, so we have it's a small sort of informal co-op of farmers' products that we're trying to deliver to faith-based communities in the GTA to form relationships between the urban population and rural Ontario. And yeah, we're trying to encourage people to either transition to organic or use, as many natural traditional methods as possible to produce like superior products.
Okay, so Rory, when you say traditional methods, what sets apart Grange Farms from some other, product that you can get at the grocery store?
So the kind of thing we're looking at is the disappearance of the mixed farm, okay? And I think from my perspective, this is like the bedrock of the farming community. It should be. It's the most resilient kind of setup, where people are having a few chickens, a few pigs, a few cattle, this kind of thing. Very resilient kind of farm to have, which is kind of disappeared in Ontario. I mean, you've got dairy farms, you've got cash crops, and you have big feedlots. And I don't think those are resilient kind of a way to farm. And if we can encourage small farmers to have mixed farms, we're going to have a resilient rural population and types of farms that will get us through, difficult times.
Now, Ted, some farmers would say, well, that's just not sustainable. You can't make money with a small farm. How can you live like that? How do you answer those critics?
One of the things that makes it sustainable, at least financially, is the direct connection with the consumer. So in traditional farming, well, I guess what we'll call conventional farming, the large scale specialized farming, the farmer is just the producer of a raw commodity. And there's a whole lot of hands that commodity goes through, and usually a lot of processing before it finally ends up in the kitchen of some consumer. So by managing that whole process, that whole supply chain, we take back to the farm a much larger percentage of the consumer dollar. So that's sort of how we get by the financing part. It is a very, very difficult task to operate a small scale, diverse farm. The economies of scale are not there.
Okay, I want to pick up this discussion when we return from this commercial break, because I think a lot of our viewers are interested in why this farm-to-table movement is making such an impact. Welcome back. We're discussing health, wellness, and food and farming on today's show, and how COVID has maybe impacted your thinking on all those matters. And joining me is Rory O'Neill of Grange Farms and Ted Zettel of Zettel Family Farms. Ted, before the commercial break, we're discussing, how sustainable a family farm can be, and you obviously have a multi-generational organic family farm. I love the idea that you're really connected to the end consumer, that you kind of oversee that process from beginning to end. Pick up on the point you were mentioning just before we went for break.
Sure. So another key aspect of that is that we're able to differentiate our product. So we're doing something special. In our case, it's certified organic. The animals are outside, even pigs and chickens are grazing, they're eating grass, and that creates a different product. It's really in a class by itself. And what we're finding is that there are many people who are dissatisfied with the regular supermarket offering and who are willing to support that kind of a venture with a bit more money from their household going toward food.
And I think with COVID, again, with some having a little bit of more time, I'm sure you were busier than ever. Farm never stops, whether there's COVID or not. People sort of gave extra pause to think about, well, what am I eating and how am I eating? And, why don't I know how to cook? And maybe I should. And what kind of ingredients am I using? With Grange Farms, Rory, how has COVID impacted your business positively or negatively?
Okay, so it definitely impacted our marketing strategy because before COVID, we were able to directly relate to faith-based groups, like talk to them in person and have great conversations about where your food comes from, the quality of your food, and local produce as opposed to international. But as soon as COVID hit, it changes the dynamic of how we can interact with people. So then we're forced to go to a digital online marketing kind of a strategy, which, I don't know how resilient that is either. So it's been a mixed bag. You've got a lot more orders because people are concerned about food security and the resiliency of the supply chain. But on the other hand, you're dependent on, the system to get your products, to get the word out, to process payments, et cetera. So pluses and negatives for sure.
Okay, and Ted, has your business seen a boom with, more urban-minded folks kind of seeking a little bit more refuge in the countryside, thinking a little bit harder of what kind of food they're eating?
Well, I think that the possibility or the specter of possible shortages in supermarkets made a lot of people think about food in a way they maybe hadn't thought of it before. We just take for granted that everything we want will always be available down at the supermarket. And, that's a really kind of short-sighted view because that system is very, very complex and dependent on actors all over the world. So one good thing we see coming out of COVID is that it showed up the deficiencies and the shortages in that global supply chain, how vulnerable and fragile it is, where we might have producers and consumers right in the same county that can't connect with each other because we don't have the infrastructure to connect them. So we did see a huge spike in demand. It's leveled off again now, but I think it has created some more awareness among the population that the food system needs to be examined. We need to look at the weaknesses in it and how we can improve it.
Yeah, and I think COVID also gave pause and forced us to kind of think about supporting local businesses. Rory, you said you're a co-op of small scale farmers. Ted, yours is a multi-generational organic farm. More people, they were kind of annoyed with the lineups and the eclipsing of these larger retails like the Costco's, like the Walmarts, and wanted to support local. Did you find that also boosted your business, Ted?
Well, what we ran into was that suddenly there was a lot of interest and we just didn't have the local processing capacity to handle it. So we've progressively eliminated butcher shops, abattoirs through really heavy regulation of that industry over the past 30 or 40 years, going, from thousands down to a few hundreds in Southern Ontario. And now we're seeing that even if you have the demand, there's no place to get your cattle and your pigs butchered. We're scheduling that like 2 years out now.
Yeah,
Wow.
Because of just the shortage of actual facilities.
Rory, you wanted to chime in there?
Yeah, I would totally agree with Ted. I think COVID acted like a warning to our population of how fragile the system is. Like you said, with the abattoirs and the butcher shops and the processing and the supermarket chains and the distribution network. I mean, this is a warning, and we need to become more resilient as far as food goes.
Thank you both so much for joining me today. Well, joining me now to share her perspective on food, health, and wellness is Emily Kennedy, a health and wellness coach and registered holistic nutritionist. Thank you, Emily, for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tanya.
So COVID really, in my mind at least, and I think we've seen the fruits in society, but it really has given us an opportunity to kind of reevaluate what we're eating, how we're living, what we can do better. And I think a lot of Canadians have really jumped at that opportunity.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think that what you highlighted in your previous guests talk about slowing down, getting back to organic and what is natural. And what I'd like to say is, not everybody can access these perks of being in a rural setting, but whether you're urban or rural, we see that people are trying to take a more hands-on approach to their stress management, their sleep, and also their exercise routine. So I think that one of the things I want to highlight as a trend is that people are focusing more on what their behavior changes can be, as opposed to just looking for quick fixes like popping a pill or taking a supplement.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I mean, even with all this talk of COVID vaccine mandates in Canada, obviously it's a huge deal. Some people say, well, that's just a quick fix. Why don't we do more to boost our natural immunity? So you see these kind of general discussions on what can we do to make ourselves healthier, better, live better lives.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that we can do. It does take a little bit of rolling up your sleeves and asking yourself some of the hard questions like, why am I not doing what I know I should do in terms of stress management and sleep? We know that those two things, stress management, sleep, and exercise, are known to reduce cortisol levels. I mean, stress itself is the cortisol response in our body. And sleep and exercise are the top two natural ways to deal with the cortisol rise in our bodies when we feel like we're anxious and we feel like we want to eat emotionally and all those things that as humans we're all prone to. So what I see people starting to realize is it's about the behavior changes. It's about the small micro habits. What's sustainable, right? Like your previous guests have probably highlighted. What's sustainable in terms of the ecosystem for them, but on an individual level, what's sustainable in terms of you as a person who is body, mind, and spirit. So one of the things, in my role as a health coach is to ask people to be aware first of what their habits are and share, speak to, when it's time to go to bed, what do you do? Okay, we know that getting adequate sleep and quality sleep is important for our stress management. So what do you do when it's time to tuck in?
Well, I probably do the worst things. I go onto Twitter and read political blogs and political stats. And we just came through election, so a lot of polling data, probably the worst thing for stress levels and sleep.
It probably is, right? And
but I did have my blue light filter on, so I get a bonus point for that.
Good for you. Good for you. And a lot of people like me, I've got my blue light glasses, right? So we're more aware than ever before of what are the things that impact the quality of our health and the quality of our stress management and therefore our immune function. So that's my role as a coach, is to get people to say out loud what they already know and then hold them accountable to small changes.
Okay, let's talk about some of those small changes. We have about a minute before we go to commercial, but with respect to sleep, what should we be doing how can we, and how can we do it better?
Yeah. So in terms of sleep, what you're looking for is quality over quantity. So sleeping in a completely dark room, as free from electronics as you can possibly stand it, right? And making sure that you have a routine that helps you to clear the clutter from your mind as well as your environment. So making a checklist, making sure that you're ready for the next day, if it's going to be busy, making sure that you're ready so that when you actually want to go to sleep, your mind is not still racing. It all starts in your head, and it all starts first with your thought processes that then translate into your actions.
Oh, those are some excellent tips. As you're saying them, I'm running through lists in my mind, like, oh, I really ought not to be doing that, or maybe I should encourage the children to do more of that. There's so many things we should discuss here. We're going to pick up this discussion when we return from this commercial breaks in a few moments.
Okay.
We're picking up our discussion with Emily Kennedy, a health and wellness coach and registered holistic nutritionist. Emily, stress is always a part of our life. I have felt personally more anxious, more stressed out with COVID because we just didn't know what was happening day to day with lockdowns, vaccine mandates, what's open, what's closed. It's been very anxious. What would be a good approach for stress management? What are some practical tips?
Right. I totally hear you. And what you're saying is in the minds of many Canadians and North Americans. So what a good approach is always goes back to what you feel you can do on an ongoing basis. It doesn't have to be a broad sweeping change. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I've never journaled in my life, but all of a sudden everybody's journaling, so I think I should journal.
Yes.
No. If that doesn't suit your personality type, then don't go for it. Go for something that suits your personality type first. So it starts with knowing yourself, okay? That's where it always begins. And we know what the science shows. I'm just gonna remind people that we know that sleep and exercise drive down cortisol levels. And I just want to talk briefly about the exercise because I see over and over again that people know this is good for them, so they go all out, right? And they overdo the exercise because they feel like they want to change a certain muscle group or they want to be competitive with some friends. That's actually stress inducing. What your goal should be for exercise is something that you enjoy. Something that actually relaxes you, something that when you're done with your workout, you actually feel refreshed and invigorated as opposed to exhausted and needing a nap and not ready to do any activity for a few days.
So how would we know which exercises kind of suit our personality?
Yeah, so there are actually resources that you can find online, similar to Myers-Briggs personality tests, that test what suits you as a person, right? And it can, you run through this personality test and then it gives you ideas for sustainable, enjoyable activities like hiking, like dancing, or maybe you like something more hands-on like jujitsu, martial arts, that kind of thing. But it's like thinking outside the box of your Peloton routines and your boot camps and going for something that's a little more natural to the way you feel about your body and getting you back into a comfort level with your body as opposed to trying to push all the time.
Right. Those are some excellent points. One thing I noticed during COVID, frequently we would hear about a secondary pandemic, which was a mental health disintegration within society, that people were complaining their mental health wasn't up to par. And, we talk about how various lockdowns impacted, say, faith communities. A lot of people go to their places of worship for that kind of mental well-being. What are your thoughts on how that impacted or how that can help and aid and abet your wellness?
Yeah, I think it can have a huge impact. And we know that anxiety levels are at an all-time high. And we need to be reminded that we can actually cast our anxieties on He who cares. And whether you are Christian or of another faith background, there has actually been a huge uptake in resources. Faith communities have transformed themselves into a resource, recognizing that we are body, mind, and spirit persons. And they've tied in the practice of religion to wellness. They've tied in things like there's Ramadan boot camps, there's Christian wellness retreats for the whole family. There are Catholic yoga practices called Soul Core. There are Muslim YouTube videos for specific to speaking to what their faith traditions are. And this, I think, is a really innovative way to approach stress management and wellness, because it ties in all the aspects of the human person as embodied spirits, and remembering, as a dear friend of mine likes to say, that this is not our first rodeo.
Well, listen, on that note, we've got to cut it there. But thank you so much, Emily, for joining us today with your insights.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Have a good day. So if you've had some spare time on your hands, maybe this is the time that you do need to rethink wellness, rethink how you live and what you eat and what you could be doing better. If we can't do it now, when can we do it? For Counterpoint, I'm Tanya Granick-Allen.